Ever cut someone off and never looked back? Right, I did, if so.
At my engagement dinner, right as Mark started his toast with that careful voice he uses when he knows my parents are listening for flaws, my sister Ashley leaned back in her chair with that practiced little smile she saves for moments she can turn into her stage and said, drawn out like she was giving a speech, that it was too bad everyone was talking about her baby now because this was clearly the bigger news, and the way the table shifted toward her with all the automatic cooing and the quick questions about due dates and names landed like a slap that somehow came in slow motion and still managed to sting immediately. I wish I could say I handled it like someone enlightened and serene, but the truth is I felt my face get hot while my mother announced that family comes first and a new life is a blessing, as if an engagement is some kind of coupon you can use later, and my father, who loves avoiding conflict the way some people love golf, stared so hard at the bread basket you would think the secret to happiness was hiding under those rolls, while Ashley did that gentle pat on my forearm that looks kind on the surface and feels like a shove when you know her history, and I heard myself laugh in a way that told everyone I was trying not to cry, which only made her smile wider. Mark slid his hand onto my knee the way he does when he wants me to feel anchored, and in a voice that stayed calm in the way that scares people more than shouting ever could he finish the toast anyway, saying he was proud to marry the woman at his side and that he could not wait to build a life that did not require anyone else's permission slip. And there was this awkward pocket of silence where my aunt tried to clap, but lost the rhythm, and someone offered Ashley their dessert because apparently expecting means you get cake by default, and I watched my sister drink in the room like a performer taking a bow even though the show was not hers. If this had been the first time, maybe I would have let it go with some bitter joke and a long walk later, but this is a woman who has practiced the art of stepping in front of me since we were old enough to understand that praise is a currency in our family. And there is a deep tiredness that sets in when you realize the pattern was not a phase, that the rebranded college party she threw on the same weekend as my graduation was not an accident, that the suspiciously timed social media post on the day of my job announcement was not coincidence, and that the way my parents always said that is just how she is was less a statement and more a permission slip she heard loud and clear. So I sat there while plates moved and chairs scraped and people circled Ashley with congratulations that were clearly sincere and also badly timed. And I thought about how yelling would only turn me into the difficult one and would hand her the victim role she has always been willing to audition for at a moment's notice. And I realized that if I wanted out of this loop I would need to stop begging for a fair fight and start setting the rules myself, which is not a comfortable truth, but comfort is what got me here. The thing about Mark is that he knows how to read me without a meeting, so while my mother debated nursery colors with a woman who cannot keep a plant alive, he pulled out his phone under the table and opened the file we had been tinkering with for weeks, but had not finalized because I kept telling myself I wanted a family reveal that included everyone at once, something sweet and tidy that would allow Ashley to behave. Which is like telling rain not to be wet, and he looked at me with an expression that said we could either keep trying to earn fairness or we could make our own momentum. I nodded in a way that probably looked like I was agreeing to coffee, and we tightened everything in minutes because the bones were already there, the guest list cleaned up, the email draft waiting, the design simple and direct, and the message balanced on that fine line between gracious and undeniable. And once we had it ready, we added the line that changed the temperature of the whole thing, the line that told people to watch their inboxes that night for a revised save the date with a small surprise attached, because if you are going to reclaim your own evening you might as well hand people something they can hold. I excused myself under the pretense of checking on the bill, and in the hallway outside the private room where the staff were stacking plates and pretending not to hear the family politics humming through the door, I stood with Mark and read the message aloud once. Not to be dramatic, but to make sure the tone was steady, because I wanted warmth without apology and excitement without begging for applause, and I wanted the people who loved us to feel included while the people who loved the spotlight more than us felt an unfamiliar draft. When we hit send, the list lit up like a quiet scoreboard that no one else in that room could see, and it felt less like revenge and more like choosing myself in a way I should have done years ago, except if I am being totally honest it also felt like revenge. Because I am not a saint and I am fine with that, and as the responses began to stack up with the kind of joyful shock that moves attention the way gravity moves everything else, I straightened my shoulders and walked back to the table. With a steady smile that had nothing to do with pretending. Ashley launched into a long explanation about how she had always imagined a certain kind of baby shower, and how dates were already being claimed, and how it would be so great if the family could focus on one celebration at a time, so she did not feel overwhelmed. Which was a speech built to sound thoughtful if you were not listening closely, and built to sound territorial if you were, and I let her run it out while Mark put his card down and thanked the staff by name, because nothing unsettles a person who expects a fight like someone who refuses to enter the ring. By the time we hugged people goodbye with the exact amount of firmness required to be polite without surrender, the first wave of replies had become a swell. And as we stepped into the parking lot, I watched Mark glance at his phone with that half smile that means good chaos is arriving, and he said, quietly enough that only I could hear it, that the save the date had landed, that people were buzzing, and that we should probably turn off notifications before the group chat melted, and even though I kept my face neutral, I felt something unstick inside me, a little proof that you can redirect the current without overturning the boat. In the car, with the engine humming and the leftover adrenaline sliding around my chest like a bad drink finally wearing off, I opened the message one more time and reread the bold line we had tucked in near the bottom that no one could miss and no one could politely ignore. The promise that a new save the date was going out that night with an update that would make planning easier for everyone and would lock in our celebration in a way that left no room for calendar games, and I did not say anything out loud because I did not need to brag, but I let myself feel the quiet thrill of a first move played clean and played well. Ashley had wanted the night to be about her, and had made it about her by taking my moment and putting it in her pocket, but as the replies rolled in and the messages turned from congratulations in her direction to excitement in ours, I realized that sometimes the fairest thing you can do is to stop waiting for fairness and to choose a path that does not require someone else's permission, and while I am not proud of enjoying the turn, I am not ashamed either, because I did not ask for this fight. And I am done pretending the rules were ever written for me. She was not laughing when her phone buzzed with the same message everyone else received, and I know this because she texted me a handful of minutes later with a sweet little note disguised as a question that I decided not to answer. Since silence sometimes tells the truth better than any speech, and while she started typing again, I powered my phone down and leaned my head back and let the quiet sit, because the first move had been made, and the next one was already lining up, and tomorrow would bring the noise, but tonight the game had finally shifted in my favor. The morning after the dinner, I woke up with that heavy mix of embarrassment and stubbornness that feels like a hangover without the fun, and while Mark made coffee and watched me pace like I was burning a track in the rug, I said out loud, more to convince myself than him, that I was not going to let one more chapter of my life be narrated by Ashley and then excused by my parents, as if fairness is optional when the loudest person in the room wants something, and he nodded in that steady way he has when he is letting me own the decision while already moving 3 steps ahead on execution, because that is how he loves me, not with a speech but with a plan. You would think one incident would be survivable, and if it had been an accident I would have found a way to laugh it off and chalk it up to bad timing. But the truth is the dinner was not a one-off, and the minute I let myself say that, clearly everything from the past lined up like a row of pushpins on a corkboard. Because there was the graduation weekend where my parents cut a cake with Ashley's name on it too, because she had just gotten an internship and everyone wanted her to feel included. There was the job promotion announcement I had worked for with months of late nights that somehow turned into a conversation about Ashley's new apartment because first places are milestones. And there were the holidays when we were all supposed to be equal at one table, but she would call a pre-dinner huddle to unveil a personal update, and I would sit there with a polite smile that made my jaw ache, while people pivoted without noticing that I was shrinking. And the worst part was that every time I brought it up, I was told that I was sensitive or jealous or reading too much into it, which is a special kind of gaslighting that teaches you to keep the peace by erasing yourself. So I did the opposite of erasing and started cataloging, not to build a case like some courthouse drama, but to make sure I was not rewriting history to make myself the victim. And when I looked at the pattern with clear eyes, it was ruthless, predictable, and always dressed up as innocence, which is when my friend Dana's voice landed in my head like a seatbelt click and reminded me that you do not beat a person like Ashley by yelling louder, because volume is her home turf. You outflank her with calm boundaries and clever timing, and if there is a touch of pettiness involved, then maybe that is the toll for finally choosing yourself. Mark and I opened the wedding folder we had been nursing in the background and went line by line through every decision point that could be hijacked, and instead of treating them like logistics, we treated them like levers. Because I was tired of playing defense while pretending I was expecting good faith from someone who had never offered it, which is how the save the date turned from a courtesy into a vehicle. The guest list turned from a spreadsheet into a map of people who actually show up. And the website turned from a cute gallery into a control panel that would take the microphone out of Ashley's hand before she even realized there was a stage. We spoke with the venue coordinator and moved from a standard weekend to a destination package we had been eyeing but hesitated to choose because we were trying to be considerate about everyone's budgets and calendars. And then we did the most liberating thing I have done in years by deciding we would shoulder the travel and rooms for immediate family and the handful of friends who have been through real life with us. Not because we wanted to flex, but because removing the bargaining chips takes away half the drama, and between Mark's mountain of travel points from his old consulting job and a vendor discount the coordinator had hinted at if we booked quickly, it became something we could swing without asking anyone's permission, which felt like reclaiming the steering wheel of my own life. Next, we rebuilt the website so that the front page carried an unmissable banner asking guests to confirm by a firm date, because charter blocks and meal counts were tied to deposits, which is true and also deliciously rigid. And tucked behind that page was a tidy little system where speeches were limited to parents and one sibling, selected by the couple, with introductions handled by the officiant. And in case anyone missed the implication, we added a polite line thanking everyone in advance for keeping to the schedule so the evening could stay focused on the commitment being celebrated rather than surprise announcements. And while it read like event management, anyone who knows Ashley would hear it like a locked door with a key she did not have. I called my mother not to ask for approval, but to inform her in a warm, level voice that the wedding communications were moving to the website and email list only, and that we would not be mixing celebrations because the dates were now fixed and deposits were moving. And when she started to say that it might be nice to combine a shower weekend with something for the baby to make travel sensible, I said that the best way to love both events was to let them breathe on their own, and that I had already arranged travel for immediate family, so no one had to choose, and the silence on the other end was the kind that happens when a parent realizes their default influence has finally met a boundary that will not wobble. Then I called Ashley, not to fight but to aim the conversation where it needed to go, and I congratulated her sincerely because I am not a monster and a baby is a baby, but I also told her I was excited for her and, as a heads up, our wedding communications were going out in phases, starting with a save-the-date refresh and a website update later that evening, and I let the sentence hang there without apologizing for the timing because I did not steal anything from her. I simply refused to give away what was mine, and when she tried to float the idea that we keep things casual and maybe leave toasts open because spontaneity makes the night feel alive, I smiled into the phone and said that our officiant was firm about timing and we trusted him completely. Which is true because the officiant is Mark's friend who treats a schedule like a sacred oath. For the small piece of revenge that kept me sane while still living in the neighborhood of good manners, I finished the call by sending a generous baby gift card in our names with a short message that wished her an easy pregnancy and a joyful shower, while also thanking her in advance for understanding our wedding boundaries and pointing her politely to the website guidelines. Because there is something deeply satisfying about giving someone exactly what they want while making it impossible for them to hijack what is not theirs, and when I hit send on that message, I felt the room tilt back in my favor just a little, the way it does when you finally stop waiting for permission and start acting like your own life belongs to you. By the time afternoon rolled around, I was done replaying the dinner, and I was done bargaining with the version of myself that always asks for a kinder tone or a softer landing. So I opened the laptop, poured coffee I did not need, and started treating this like what it was, not a romantic montage, but a logistics problem with a history of sabotage, which meant every detail that could be hijacked needed to be designed so that there was nothing loose to grab. And as I walked Mark through the checklist we had drafted half as a fantasy and half as therapy, he did that quiet thing where he adds two more safeguards without announcing them, because he knows that what calms me is not a pep talk, but proof that the rails are bolted down. We confirmed the destination package with the coordinator, who had been gentle but direct about deadlines, and when she said that moving deposits before the end of the week would lock in room blocks, transfers, and the schedule that kept speeches tight, I felt that strange mix of relief and adrenaline that comes when you finally pick a lane after months of pretending all lanes are equal, and we authorized the transfer with a note that immediate family and the friends who have shown up for years would be covered by us, not as a stunt, but as a shield against guilt and bargaining, because the way you keep a stage focused is by removing the excuses people use to grab the microphone. And the minute that invoice stamped paid, I realized I had been waiting a long time for paperwork to be on my side. We rebuilt the website with a homepage that felt warm and plain-spoken while also being a locked door in every way that mattered. And instead of the usual soft language about open mics and spontaneous toasts, we wrote a simple line about the officiant guiding the evening with a firm timeline so the vows could stay at the center, which anyone outside our family would read as good planning and anyone inside our family would hear as a silent message that the stage was no longer available for pop-up announcements. And for the invitation pipeline, Mark set up unique links with one code per household that automatically populated travel and seating, which makes life easier for guests and also makes it impossible for someone to add mystery plus ones and then claim it was a misunderstanding. And I swear I felt taller just typing that paragraph. Because I know my mother and I know the way guilt can rewrite a week, I called her and told her the happy news first, that we were covering the big pieces to make it easy for everyone, that she could stop fretting about cousins pooling miles and aunts sharing rooms, and that the only thing she needed to do was enjoy it and not worry about coordinating surprises. And when she started to say that Ashley's due date and shower planning would make the calendar tight, I said, kindly and firmly, that the best way to honor both events was to keep them separate and let them shine on their own, which is a diplomatic sentence that also means my wedding will not be a nursery planning committee. And after a pause, she said she understood and that she was proud of me for being organized, and even though I know that is not a medal, it felt like a small one. I texted my dad next because he responds better when he is given something he can do rather than something he has to feel, and I asked him to handle one job that matters more than it sounds, which was calling a handful of older relatives to tell them to expect an email and to check their spam folder, because the only thing I wanted less than Ashley stealing my moment was the family technological gap stealing it. And he sent back a short message with a thumbs-up tone that told me he might not say the right thing at the table, but he was happy to be useful now, and that was enough for me. Then I called Ashley, not because I owed her a briefing, but because it is easier to manage fallout when you drop facts cleanly and leave no space for revisionism, and I congratulated her again, told her I hoped she was feeling well, and let her know that we were sending a save-the-date refresh that evening along with a website link where travel details lived and where the officiant's schedule was posted so no one's time would be wasted. And she did that light laugh that is meant to sound supportive and instead sounds like a test, and asked if we were sure we wanted to be so formal because family gatherings are more fun when things are loose. And I said that the coordinator had explained how strict timing keeps the event smooth and that we were trusting the experts. And I let the silence after that line do the heavy lifting, because sometimes the most effective boundary is the one you state once and never explain again. With the calls done, I went back to the message we had drafted and read it out loud to Mark to make sure it sounded like us and not a committee. And we added one last paragraph that asked everyone to hold off on posting photos or details until wedding week because we wanted the surprise intact for the people who could not travel. which is honest and also stops the common attention grab of turning someone else's event into your preview reel, and we queued the first batch to go out right after dinner when people tend to look at their phones, and we queued the second batch to go out an hour later because experience has taught me that staggered waves keep momentum alive. And then I did the small ruthless thing I promised myself I would do by placing Ashley's address in the second wave so that she would open her inbox to a world already buzzing rather than being the first to break the news. Which might sound petty, but feels like justice when you have a catalog of history and a therapist who says intention matters. We hit schedule, watched the dashboard show the countdown like a quiet fuse, and instead of pacing, I sat on the couch with Mark and let the quiet do its work because I had finally set up a plan that did not require me to shout or explain or beg. And when the first confirmation started to flicker in with that happy shock that means people feel taken care of, I exhaled in a way I had not done in years, and I realized that revenge can look like calm systems that leave no room for chaos dressed as spontaneity, and that the most satisfying part is knowing the old tricks are not just discouraged, they are impossible, which is a feeling I plan to keep. The messages started landing the way rain begins in a steady pattern you can measure, not frantic or showy, but undeniable and building. And within a handful of minutes, the replies shifted from the usual polite acknowledgments people send out of obligation to those excited paragraphs you can feel even through a screen where friends and cousins and the handful of relatives who actually check in throughout the year were saying that they could not believe we were taking the stress out of travel and rooms, that they felt seen and included in a way that made the whole thing feel like a gift instead of a chore, and that they had already clicked the link, entered the code, and marked themselves in with the kind of relief that comes when somebody finally runs a family event like it is an adult project rather than a group chat free-for-all. By the time the first wave settled into a hum, there were notes from people I love and people I tolerate asking the real questions that always show up when the buzz wears off. The ones about childcare and vacation time and whether passports were still valid, and if there would be a quiet place for grandparents to sit when they got tired. And it was oddly satisfying to reply with calm answers we had pre-written. Because we had already arranged travel blocks, added a straightforward line about a small on-site sitter pool for the ceremony window, put a clear RSVP date tied to deposits, and included a page for accessibility details that did not make anyone feel like they were asking for special treatment. And I kept noticing how often the word thoughtful appeared, which stung a little because it made me realize how often I had labeled myself difficult for asking for basic structure in a family that confuses chaos with closeness. The website did exactly what we wanted by greeting everyone with warmth while quietly closing every door that used to swing open at the worst moments because the RSVP required a one-household code. The +1 policy was printed in plain language and enforced by the form itself. The gallery was locked until the week of the wedding, so there was nothing to drip out for attention points, and the schedule page replaced that vague promise of open mic after dinner with a firm outline that said toasts would be limited to parents and one sibling selected by the couple and introduced by the officiant, and although that line reads like standard planning to strangers, everyone who has spent a holiday with us knows it means the microphone is no longer a toy and that the stage will not be handed to whoever reaches for it first, which was the point, and also the relief. Ashley stayed quiet longer than felt natural for her, which was almost more unnerving than if she had thrown a public fit right away. And then a friend sent me a screenshot of a vague status that said sometimes people try to steal your joy when you are glowing and you have to rise above it for your baby, and I put my phone face down because nothing good happens when you fight with smoke. But a few minutes later she finally called, and I could hear that tight brightness in her voice that means everything inside is too hot, and she said she wished I had spoken to her before sending a destination plan that would make travel hard for family who are trying to budget for a baby. And I said that we had already covered travel for immediate family and a few close friends, and that the website had the details. And when she pivoted to say that limiting toasts was a little controlling for a family event, I said we were following the officiant's schedule and we were confident it would keep the night focused, and I let the silence do the rest because I am done explaining boundaries to someone who treats each explanation like a challenge round. My mother called after that with the voice she uses when she wants me to reconsider without saying the word reconsider, and she suggested that maybe the two of us could coordinate so Ashley could share a small moment at the reception, nothing big. Maybe a quick update so people could feel included, and I said that the best gift we could give both events was to let them breathe on their own, and that I was not building a wedding where news drops compete with vows, and when she reminded me that family is about compromise, I told her I had compromised for years by pretending sabotage was spontaneity, and that this time I was choosing clarity, after which she sighed and said she did not want to fight, and I said neither did I. And then my dad texted a simple proud of you for being organized, which landed like water after a long run even if it was only 6 words and a period in my head, and I took the win without needing him to turn it into a speech. When the second wave went out and Ashley's email finally hit, the group thread that includes most of our cousins was already moving with plans and jokes and seat-swapping strategies, and those little pockets of kindness where people offer to share childcare or trade flight credits. And within minutes, she texted me directly to say that she was hurt I had chosen Mark's sister to give the sibling toast because it sent a message about where she stands, and I told her calmly that the message was exactly what it needed to be, which is that the microphone is for people who honor the moment rather than harvest it, and that she was welcome to attend as a guest, celebrate as a sister, and be as happy as she wanted without turning my vows into a press conference, and I could feel her weighing the options the way she always does when attention is not guaranteed, and then she said a sentence that set the next move in motion, because she told me she would be bringing a surprise for the family. 2. Announce at the reception whether it was on the schedule or not, and I said very evenly that surprises are wonderful in the right room, but that our venue has a technical team who follows the timeline to the minute, after which I hung up, opened the production email, and wrote the instruction that would end the mystery once and for all in a way she would not see coming. When I sent the production note that afternoon, I kept it short because I wanted clarity more than drama, so I asked the coordinator to run the timeline like a train schedule with the officiant as the only person who could hand a microphone to anyone. I asked the sound tech to keep a quiet kill switch under the console in case a guest decided to turn a toast into a speech nobody asked for, and I asked the bandleader to be ready with a music cue that would roll straight into dessert if the room needed a redirect, which might sound intense to people who have never watched a family event get derailed in real time. Yet to me felt like the bare minimum of sanity after years of being told to be flexible while someone else played fast and loose with what mattered to me. The save the date that had gone out the night before was already doing its work by then, not just because it confirmed the destination and the travel support and the RSVP system that locked the doors everyone used to push open, but because it contained the insert that Mark and I decided to write when we finally admitted that the best way to stop a hijacking is to give the would-be hijacker their own runway with a specific time and a specific plane. So tucked behind our card with the website link was a second card in the same design that invited everyone to a baby shower for Ashley 2 weekends before our wedding, hosted by us at a place near our parents so travel would be simple, with food and decorations handled and gifts politely discouraged because what we wanted was to celebrate her without turning it into a registry parade. And the only request printed in the plainest language I could manage was that wedding week remain announcement-free so both events could breathe without stepping on each other, which meant she could not claim I was trying to erase her, and she could not claim the only way to be seen was to take my night, because I had set a table just for her and put her name on it in ink. When she opened hers, which I know happened during the second wave because I placed her there on purpose, she did not call right away, and for a few hours I allowed myself the small hope that she would recognize a lifeline when she saw one. That she would hear the message inside the message which said you do not have to steal, you can be given, and that maybe we could get through this without the usual performance where one of us is the villain and the other is the martyr, yet by evening she called with that bright tone that means she is about to reframe generosity as control and asked if I understood how condescending it felt to have a shower planned for her without her input, and I said very evenly that the shower was a gift and not a leash, that the date was confirmed with our parents so the people who mattered could attend, and that if she wanted to adjust details I would hand her the contact for the planner we had already hired and step back, after which she went quiet. Because There is no applause line when you are offered control and exposure at the same time, and she hung up with a curt thanks that sounded more like a dare than gratitude. Wedding week came faster than I expected because momentum shortens time, and what I remember most is not flowers or centerpieces, but how calm the room felt when expectations are a matter of record rather than negotiation. Since the officiant guided the evening like a pilot, the toasts happened on schedule. My mother was busy enjoying herself instead of whispering strategy at me. My dad actually laughed at a joke Mark's sister made during her toast about choosing love over the scoreboard, and I could see in the faces of people who love us that they were relieved to be freed from the usual tug of loyalties because we had removed the rope, and in that quiet confidence I finally exhaled. Ashley did try, because of course she did, and the attempt was not a meltdown or a scene but a subtle rise from her chair during a lull that most people would not notice. A small step toward the bandstand with a hand raised in that careful way that says she is about to ask for only a minute, and before she reached the microphone the bandleader nodded at the console. The music slid in as if it had always been scheduled there. The lights settled on the cake and the officiant walked gently to her, sighed and said he could not wait to see her at her shower the following weekend where she would have all the time in the world. Then he offered his arm and guided her back to her seat with a warmth that made it impossible to play the victim without looking ungracious. And the room applauded because they thought it was sweet rather than strategic, which was exactly the point, since I have no interest in public humiliation, only in keeping my vows intact. Later that night she came to me with eyes that were bright but not angry, the way someone looks when they finally meet a wall that will not move and realize it is load-bearing. And she said she did not like how managed the evening felt, but she could see that I was serious about keeping the focus where it belonged. And I told her that I had spent years asking for the kind of respect I was willing to give, and that this time I decided to make it non-optional. Then I thanked her for coming and told her I would see her next weekend at a party with her name on it, and for once she nodded without adding a condition, which might be the closest thing to an apology I will ever get. When the night was over and the last song faded and the people we love were hugging us with that easy joy that comes when nothing goes off the rails, Mark asked me if I felt bad about the kill switch or the insert or the second card or the way the whole room had clearly been engineered. And I told him I felt like I had finally learned my own family's language and chosen to speak it better than the person who has been using it against me, because I had written a plan that did not need me to yell or plead or prove anything in the moment, and I had offered a separate spotlight with my own money and my own time, and I had enforced the boundary with kindness that could not be spun as cruelty, which meant I won without becoming the thing I hate. People will say we went too far or not far enough depending on what makes them comfortable. Yet when I think about the dinner where my engagement turned into a backdrop for someone else's news and about the years of being told to take the high road while other people took the road they wanted, I know exactly what I did and why I did it. And I know that the laugh I heard when Ashley made her announcement at that first dinner does not echo anymore, because the card she read that night changed the script and the room and the ending, and the part one like best is that the final move did not look like a trap. It looked like an invitation with a bow, which is why it worked. And why I finally went to sleep feeling like the shadow I had accepted for so long had finally moved off of me for good.